I'm Eddie Muller, welcoming you to Noir Alley and the Grand Lake Theater in Oakland, California. On a weekend, we honor the men and women of the U.S. Armed Forces who've given their lives in service to the nation. It's not that easy finding a noir film appropriate to Memorial Day, but I decided to go with the 1945 RKO release Cornered, starring Dick Powell. He portrays a demobilized World War II veteran determined to track down the man who killed his war bride, a French resistance fighter. The hunt takes him to Switzerland and eventually to Argentina. Well, it's the best suggestion of those countries that RKO could simulate on its sound stages. The filmmakers compensate for the lack of location shooting with some savvy casting, art direction, and wardrobe design. Cornered was made by the same team that created Murder, My Sweet the previous year. That film was not only a surprise box office hit, it proved to be a breakthrough for everyone involved, especially Dick Powell, who coveted the role of Private Eye Philip Marlowe as a way of altering his image. The cherubic crooner of the 1930s made a surprisingly effective tough guy, smoking, drinking, and wisecracking nonstop as he gets regularly beaten up. Powell so relished this professional rebirth, he wanted to follow it with something even darker, tougher, and more potent. His Murder, My Sweet colleagues, producer Adrian Scott and director Edward Dmytryk, were eager to accommodate. But little did they know that development of the project would become a saga of deceit, betrayal, and political intrigue as dramatic as the fictional thriller they chose to make. Cornered came to RKO as a treatment by Ben Hecht, for which the new head of RKO's story department, William Dozier, paid $50 grand. Hecht was one of the most respected, highly paid, and busiest writers in the business. It was not uncommon for him to give story ideas to his colleagues, have them write up the treatments, then put his name on it to pump up the price tag. If it sold, Hecht took a commission. Dmytryk doubted that Hecht actually wrote the treatment for this film, since on first reading, he thought it was a mess. But Scott and Dmytryk loved the premise, since it satisfied their desire to make genre pictures that were timely and topical. And this story was topical. At the end of World War II, as the Third Reich crumbled under the Allied onslaught, Nazi officers fled Europe via what were known as rat lines, escape routes created to spare men from being prosecuted as war criminals. Switzerland and Argentina, two countries that maintained neutrality during the war, became havens for fugitive Nazis. Adolf Eichmann, who had masterminded the extermination of Jews as the final solution, was the most notorious Nazi to find sanctuary, at least temporarily, in Argentina. But he was only one of an estimated 9,000 Nazis, Italian fascists, French Vichy, and other collaborators allowed into the country by its president, Juan Perón. Their escape to Argentina provides the politically charged background for this film, which really should have been called Rat Lines instead of the generic Cornered. Dmytryk wanted John Paxton, who'd scripted Murder, My Sweet, to rewrite Hecht's story. But Bill Dozier broke up the Murder, My Sweet team, assigning a different writer. Producer Adrian Scott was angry about this for two reasons. First, the new writer was a well-known right-winger, and Scott and Dmytryk were members of the Communist Party of the United States. Second, nobody, Dozier included, liked the first draft that was turned in. So onto the project came writer John Wexley. Now, his politics may have been preferable to Scott, but not his script. He felt like it was a screed that prioritized political posturing over exciting scenes. In the end, Scott held out for a rewrite by John Paxton. His final draft is thorny and convoluted, but filled with confrontations and tableau that Dmytryk could have fun with, especially in the story's third act. In contrast to the writing process, production was smooth and efficient. Dmytryk was reunited with director of photography Harry Wilde, who'd shot Murder, My Sweet, and the results were just as atmospheric. On the set, things were so relaxed and convivial, Dmytryk decided to give a small role to his script supervisor, Ellen Corby. She'd played a few bit parts in the 30s, but after 1936, she worked exclusively behind the camera. Her small part here as a Swiss maid ended up reviving an acting career that would last the rest of the century, including her iconic role as Grandma Walton on the popular TV series The Waltons. The film ended up being a bigger box office success than Murder, My Sweet, but the politics involved in drafting the screenplay would come back to haunt Scott and Dmytryk. Also starring Viennese-born Walter Slezak and French actress Micheline Chirel, here's Dick Powell, out for vengeance in Cornered.